Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of having a pet with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper, and I'm joined by Haley, writer from Juniper. Take us along on your daily dog walk and don't forget to sign up for Juniper. It's free and you'll get access to articles, guides, and discounts on the best pet brands and more at www.juniperpet.co. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode. We're here with Jess Adam. She's a licensed therapist who runs handlersandhumans.com, a coaching program that helps dog owners manage their emotions, especially folks with complex, sensitive, or reactive dogs. So we're going to be talking about navigating mental health as a dog parent, which is something that I've gone through. I know Haley has gone through. We can relate to a lot of. And super excited to jump in and talk to you about this. So thank you so much for being here today. So first off, can you tell us about your dog, Dio? What's he like today? And how has your relationship grown over time?
Ooh, how many hours do we have for this podcast? Dio is 10 years old, which still blows my mind. I can't believe we're in year 10 together. He has some reactivity challenges, anxiety. He's pretty sensitive. We've been through a lot of behavioral issues in our time together. Early on in my life with him, I was doing all of the training things. Like if you name some sort of training thing to do, I'm sure it happened, right? Socialization, group classes, individual, like acupuncture, right? Like chiropractic. I mean, all of it that you can think of, we probably went down that rabbit hole at some point. And really, my relationship with him has ebbed and flowed. I feel like any deep relationship has its seasons, right? And for a really long time, I was so focused on sort of fixing and curing and figuring out the reactivity and figuring out the anxiety that he experienced. And I was super focused on him and the problems, so to speak. I shifted that focus pretty drastically after having a couple of extra challenging incidents with him that left me feeling very knocked down, really like in the bed for 24 hours crying kind of moment, honestly. And I was like, I'm doing everything. What else can I possibly do? I really got to the point that I wasn't sure if I could keep him. I didn't know if this was a dog I could manage, right? Because when you think about it, in, you know, their lives with us and you're early on with them, you think about the 8, 10, 12 years ahead. And I wasn't sure that I could do it for that much longer. So I realized I was doing all of the things I possibly could for him. And I was doing nothing for me, really. I was doing nothing to focus on my own ability to regulate. I was doing nothing to focus on my own ability to cope with what we were dealing with. I was not paying attention to the story I was telling myself about our life and relationship together. And it's funny because I'm a therapist, so you would think that I would just know to do all those things naturally and to look at that stuff, but that is not the case. I just was really neglecting my own part in things. And I feel like when I brought me into it more and took away some of that focus on fixing and problem behavior, so to speak, it really shifted my relationship with him in a pretty big way. And I feel like we just began to listen to each other in a wonderful kind of connected way. It didn't mean that the problems went away necessarily, but it meant that I felt differently about them and I felt differently about him. So that's my very long-winded explanation of our journey. And I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world at this point. And I know that people who are really in the thick of it, it's hard to hear that. It's hard to hear that, yes, we've had these challenges. Of course, I wish they were different to some degree, but actually, if you really asked me if I would wave a magic wand and take them away, I wouldn't do it now.
It's really powerful. And well, I guess the question I have for you is we don't always see this coming when we get a dog or adopt a dog. And, we think it's just going to be easy or whatever. We had a whole episode on dog dreams versus dog reality. And some of this is kind of reminding me of this because I think, Haley and I talked a lot about what we thought it would be like versus what it was actually like for us. And so Did you go through a period of sort of struggling with like, why me? Or like, what about this situation? Why has this happened to me? Am I doing something wrong? Did you go through like that whole process with yourself? And if so, like, how did you sort of come to understand the complex play between what you needed to do to take care of yourself in order to take care of your dog?
Yes. So absolutely. I went through all of those thoughts and feelings. Why me? Frustration, disappointment, really grief about what we didn't have and what I thought we would have, right? I very much, and Haley knows this, I very much wanted a therapy dog. I wanted a therapy dog to take to work with me. I'm a therapist. So I used to do equine therapy and things like that. And I really wanted to do animal assisted work in my practice. So I got a dog thinking that any dog could do that, which is funny because even looking back now, I don't know why I thought that. I know better than that, but I was just so, I really do. I was just so focused on that goal. And I really got stuck on that expectation, dog dream versus dog reality, like you said. And part of me is happy with how long it took me to kind of come to the other side of that, because I will say that goal kept me working at it, right? It kind of kept me in it because I was holding very tightly to that goal. However, once I was able to kind of learn to shift and appreciate him for who he was, it really taught me about appreciating myself for who I am and meeting myself where I was at and meeting him where he was at. And he made it very clear that he was not interested in being a therapy dog. I didn't listen initially, but he was telling me. And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. And so I had to say to myself, wow, I need to figure out a different way to, find joy and fulfillment in my life with this dog, because he's not going to be the things that I wanted him to be. And I needed to get to a point where that was okay. So that was a bit of a process. I had to let myself be bummed about that. I had to let myself feel the disappointment and frustration that we did all of the work. And this is maybe a part of my story Haley may know too. I'm not sure actually if we've talked about this, but Dio did pass the Canine Good Citizen test. He did pass the Pet Partners Therapy Dog test. He actually passed the behavioral evaluations to do those things. But once I started taking him to, which took years, by the way, to get to that point, like that was not an easy situation. I think he was maybe 4. It was actually on my birthday that we passed the therapy dog evaluation test. But it took years to get to that point. And once I actually started taking him to work, he started showing signs of serious stress going there. So we actually met the goal, so to speak, and then had to change course after we actually even got to what I thought would be the point that we could, say we made it, right? So I think that if I hadn't given myself that space to be disappointed, to feel those feelings, it's harder to move through them if you don't allow space for that. So the why me, we did all this work and now we're not where I thought we would be, right? And reorienting to the life that we did have together and the things that I did love about life with him took some work.
Did meeting the goal, passing the Canine Good Citizen, passing the therapy dog exam, did that make it easier or harder to let go of that dream? I've done similar things with Scout. Like she also has her Canine Good Citizen, which years ago felt like an impossibility. And I've often tried to process within myself, like, has it been easier to let go of some of my dreams because we did the thing and I feel like I proved myself a little? But then other times I feel like it's actually made it way harder because I did the thing that I thought would fix all of the other things. And there are still these lingering feelings and difficulties. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal experience with that whole spectrum.
That's a really great question. I think that it's changed over time, right? So I think initially it felt harder, right? Especially because I think people's perspective and people's thoughts about, oh, your dog passed this thing, so they should be X, Y, and Z. So it's not only your expectations of their behavior, but other people, if you say, yeah, my dog passed these evaluations or whatever, folks typically think that that means they're these, bomb-proof, perfect dogs, which is hilarious to me because that is not, even to this day, the dog that I have. So I think initially it was harder. It was tough for me to say, wow, he passed the things, but we're still not where I thought we should be and where other people think we should be, actually. So that was tough. At this point, though, I think after years of processing this, literally years and years of processing through this, I think it's made it easier because again, like I said before, they gave me a goalpost to try to get to, and I got there, and I'm proud of us for that. I feel really grateful for the amount of work that he and I both put in together. I'm grateful to him for putting up with all of the work that we put in to do those things. And I just think that now I look back and it's just another piece of something to be proud of us for, but it's no longer the center of what I'm proud of us for. And I think it was.
I love that. I feel like that shift is so, so, so important. And it's just another thing where it's about the balance and the middle ground and finding what's healthy for us as individuals, where, you don't want to be fixated on these external goals. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't even try to get Scouts CGC. Like, it just doesn't matter to me at all today. I just could not care less.
Oh, that's so interesting. Why do you feel that way?
She didn't enjoy the process at all. She did it because she loves me and we have a relationship, and she hated going to class every week. And I no longer feel like I have anything to prove. Like, she's a great dog and we live a good life. And I know that. I'm confident in that now. And at the time, I wasn't confident in that internally to the degree that I am today. And so I felt like I needed this thing that would signal to everyone else. And I don't regret getting it, right? I'm not at all anti-CGC. I'm happy that that's a thing that she has. There's the part of me that's happy for that. But there's also the part of me that is this at my current place feels silly, but ultimately it was a part of my processing to reach the place that I feel like I'm with her today, if any of that makes any sense.
It totally makes sense. I love that. I think there's so much in this conversation about what we put ourselves through too with our own goals and what we expect of ourselves. And I just think that I've been so surprised since getting my dog, how closely related those things are. And that's what Haley and I talk about a lot, that we're so surprised that these stories about our dogs are actually about us as people and what we're learning and the pressure we put on ourselves and all of that. So I think that's so great to share. And I think something else that stuck out to me about what you said was the time horizon. So my dog she's about to turn 2 this summer. She's really young. I was putting so much pressure on myself in the early days to get all this training done and fix reactivity issues. And like you said, you do the socialization, you're doing everything because you think it's you have to get it done. And so it's super interesting for me to hear from both of you that you did get to these places. Canine Good Citizen seems impossible because how will she ever sit with a pet on her head? Those are the things that we're not there yet. So I'm still in that space of these things feel impossible, but I love hearing from both of you about how this time horizon is longer. I think that's a way that we can also be more gentle with ourselves for everything we want to do in our lives is maybe we just zoom out a bit, give it some more time. So in your work, you're a licensed therapist, but what you mostly do is coaching. So how does this come up for your clients? What types of things are they struggling with? Is it a lot of the same type of things that we're talking about here, or do you see different things too?
Yeah, it is absolutely a lot of the same things that we're talking about here. I think whenever anyone asks me what is the biggest theme or the biggest piece that is kind of the underlying driver for a lot of the challenges that clients who come to me for coaching are going through, it typically is the expectations part. Because the expectations are sneaky, right? So I can even logically sit here and say to you, I know that I need to, expecting this about Dio is too much, or this isn't fair to him, or right? I know those things, but that doesn't mean that it's not still creeping in there sometimes in ways that I forget or I'm not paying attention to, I'm not being mindful of. So a lot of my work with folks is identifying kind of the stories that people are telling themselves about what their dog should do, is supposed to be like, those types of things, what their relationship is supposed to be like, how they're supposed to approach things with their dog, and kind of unpacking that, dismantling it a little bit, and really getting to the why. Why do you think that that's what you should do? What is driving that should, that's supposed to, that you are sticking to? And is it actually a fit for you, your dog, and your life together and how it looks and how you want it to look, right? So how I think it should look and how I want it to look if I really let go of the expectations might be two different things, right? So there's a lot of dismantling that in my work and a lot of looking at the bigger theme of where the emotions that your dog brings up in you show up elsewhere in your life, right? So for me, tons of themes, people pleasing stuff, boundary setting stuff, all of those things are big challenges for me. And they were big challenges for me in training. They are big challenges for me in all kinds of other areas in my life. And Dio just put a spotlight on them that I could not look away from. And I had to identify them, learn to work through them, and realize that when I was struggling with, anxiety about people pleasing, for example, with Dio, I was reacting not only to how that came up in my life and relationship with him and training, but also all the other ways that I struggle with that and all the other areas of my life that I struggle with that. So my emotional response was amplified when I was dealing with him. So when I work with folks in coaching, there's a lot of that amplification going on. There's a lot of, I feel very anxious about life with my dog. I feel like a failure in life with my dog, right? Whatever the theme is, perfectionism, people pleasing, boundaries, all the things. That is showing up. So I've yet to find someone who has not had that be a theme in other areas of their life overall. I've been doing one-on-one handlers and humans coaching for 3.5 years now. I have yet to meet a person who doesn't say, yeah, you're right. I do have perfectionism stuff in work, school, family, whatever it is. And it's just showing up in life with my dog, and I'm having a very amplified emotional response as a result. So it's the expectation stuff, and then it's whatever it is that your dog's pointing at for you and putting a spotlight on your behalf to invite you to heal that piece, to invite you to look more closely at that and giving you an opportunity to work through it, because they typically don't let you ignore it, is what I've found.
Yeah, not an option there.
Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes.
I feel like this is one of the things that has helped me create what feels like such deep connections with dog owners who have somewhat similar emotional experiences, because I both love and hate this reality, right? Scout has taught me so much, and my relationship with her feels very intense because all of those emotions that were intense to start with, like the amplification that you were just talking about, and all of the other connections to other areas of my life. And then it also feels intense because I've put so much work into it. I love that. I love what she's made me realize and how she's pushed me to grow. But there's also sometimes this discomfort. I guess that ties back to the first podcast episode that we ever recorded, Allison, where it's sometimes difficult to express this to someone who has not had the same feelings with their own dog, which is totally valid. We all have our own experiences. But it's when I connect with somebody who can understand everything that you just said, it's just like this spotlight lighting up, and oh my gosh, I'm not alone in these things. She's not just a dog. This is not just owning a dog. It becomes so much more than that. And your work does such a nice job of tying all those pieces together.
Thank you. That means a lot. I feel the exact same way. Connecting with anyone who has a similar emotional experience or gets what this emotional experience is like still lights me up in a ton of ways. I'm so grateful when I do get the DMs that are like, this post made me feel seen. And I'm like, great, because I wrote it about myself, right? So typically you'll see on my Instagram, most of my stuff is me just talking to me at some point in our journey, whether it's me talking to, 25-year-old me a year in with Dio struggling, or me now, I don't know, but it still helps me to do this work and to connect with other people and to see people connect with one another who experience that. I completely agree with you that most people don't get it typically, especially if they haven't had a challenging dog. until they get it, until they have that experience. And it's not that I wish that experience on anybody. It's just something that is really hard to kind of wrap your head around until you're in it. I absolutely was not expecting anything like the life and journey I have had with Dio when I got him. It is so far from what I thought life with a dog would be like. Life with my first dog as an adult would be like. Oh my gosh, it's funny to think about how little I was prepared. I was not prepared to get a dog in general, though, to be fair, let alone a reactive dog who brought up my own stuff.
I think that's part of what makes it so surprising is that if you do go on one of these journeys, you thought you were just getting a dog, a pet, no big deal, right? Like you weren't even planning on it or seeing it the way like there are other big things we do in life that we're like, okay, this is going to be big. We're moving across the country, or this is going to be big, starting a family, getting married. It's like these things are obviously big and reinforced by society as like they're going to rearrange everything, but you don't necessarily think of getting a pet or a dog that way. So I think that extra element of like the surprise aspect, but I think that there's a lot of growth and transformation that happens that I'm sure you're seeing with a lot of your clients. So like, what are some of the transformations you've seen or takeaways you've seen for people who might be listening to this that are struggling with their dog? What are some of the things people can do to sort of get on the other side of that and come to a place where they're more comfortable?
That's such a good question because it will look so different, right, for everybody. But I think when someone has experienced this, what feels so overwhelming, like we talked about earlier, was staring down the many years ahead, feeling like you're feeling right now, right? And we focus a lot, and I understand why this is, because this is sort of the focus that everyone says. We focus a lot on if I fix the things, if I change the things with my dog, behave differently, then I can live the next 5, 8, 10, 12, as many years as we're lucky to have with them in a happy way, in a way that feels good. But it has to mean that they shift and they change, right? So the work that I do, no matter what the theme is that the person is bringing, really focuses on creating sustainability within you to live that life with your dog and not have it feel constantly, always like it might feel in this particular moment when you're in the thick of it. Not that you're not going to have rough moments. I mean, I took to my own community the other day to have a huge vent about something I went through with Dio just a week or two ago with an off-leash dog. And so it's not as though I still don't have moments where I struggle. It's not as though he still doesn't do things that make me go, Dio, really? We're doing this? Okay, right? So I absolutely still go there often, maybe even, but I don't necessarily unpack and live in the overwhelm, in the anxiety, in the frustration that I was just steeped in for such a long time. So I created mindset strategies for myself. I practiced so much more mindfulness of what I was thinking, feeling, experiencing with him. I created a toolkit for myself, right? Kind of a first aid kit for those moments so that I have things to lean on that helped me through all of those things, which created sustainability. Like that's the word that I come back to. That is what made me shift when he was 4 years old. 3 and 4 years old was like a really rough time specifically. And I was like, I do not know if I can do this. I do not know if I'm the person who should keep this dog. I don't know if I can spend the next 10 years of my life with this behavior, with these feelings, with this level of overwhelm. So when I worked on all of those things for me and whatever that looked like for me, right? My coping toolkit's going to look different than yours will look. That's okay. But when I had it in place, it created sustainability for me to say, okay, we're doing this no matter what it looks like. And I created some self-trust, really, to be able to handle whatever it was that was going to happen with us, right? It wasn't that I figured out a way to prevent every reaction and every tough moment and every behavioral thing that ever happened for the years that came. It was, I was able to build a toolkit where I was able to say, whatever it is, I've got it. I can get through it. I can bounce back from it. I can create resilience. And I really feel like that's what Dio helped me figure out how to create, was resilience. And that is what I try to support people in figuring out and getting to, so that they can maybe even get to the point of joy with their dogs over the next decade instead of anxiety and overwhelm all the time.
And I know it's going to be different for every person and their unique things that they're struggling with their dog. But what are some of the things that you found that were sort of like in that toolkit for you?
First one is figuring out what helps you regulate, right? So what are the concrete things that help bring you back to center, that help ground you, that help bring your heart rate down? Like, and again, that will also look different for everyone. There's all kinds of things that you can do to help you with that. But what are the things that help you feel comforted, grounded, and sort of bring down that shakiness that we can feel when we're really overwhelmed and really anxious? So I would experiment a bit with practices that help you with that, whether it's breathing, whether it's grounding, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's getting outside without your dog. I mean, there's tons and tons of things that you could try, but figure out what it is that helps you get regulated, because that's the basis for all the other stuff, really, right? So you're not going to be able to work on your mindset and the stories you're telling yourself and your thoughts about your dog and life with your dog if you're super dysregulated. So the first piece is like, what is your toolkit for soothing, for calming, for regulating for you? And then from there, the bigger pieces can come in, right? How am I looking at this situation? Am I being fair and accurate about this scenario with my dog, right? So asking yourself those questions about how you're viewing something once you're in a place that you can do that.
I think those things are so important, and something that, especially in the challenging dog world, I feel like sometimes we get better at doing those things for our dogs than ourselves. And, it all ties back into the training that your dog sends you to, and how you can also apply so many of those concepts to yourself. The other thing that I'm curious about is, what would you say to someone who, like, they're not struggling with their dog, right? Like, dog ownership is what they wanted it to be. They're loving it. It's going really well, but maybe they know somebody who is struggling. What would you say are some of the best ways to be a support?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let me know what you think too. I would love to hear if you both agree with this. I would be encouraging someone who's not struggling with this, but knows someone who is, to validate that experience and say that even though I don't get it, I know it's real for you, right? That would be the number one thing that I would encourage people to think about, because like we just said before, if you haven't been through it, you really don't get it. A lot of people are extremely invalidating about this experience. Most people might even be extremely invalidating about this experience, right? So it's just a dog, it's not that serious. That's the theme that we all hear and feel at some point in our journey with a complex dog, from family, from friends, from anybody who hasn't really been there. So if you are someone who's not going through that, but you want to support others, validate that that is very real and ask them what they need from you to help them through that, right? Because it might be checking in about whether or not what you're inviting them to is something that is going to be a good fit for their dog. It might be asking them how to interact with their dog, right? So follow their lead and help them feel less alone, ashamed about all of these accommodations that their dog might need. Because I still to this day sometimes struggle with people wanting to come over to our house and needing to be like, okay, so here's what we need for Dio for that to be successful. And so helping people feel not judged for that, even asking them ahead of time to say, what does Dio need in this situation before I come over, is so, so, so helpful. I think, Haley, you and I even had kind of a similar, when we were going to meet up, a similar conversation. Like, I think we're going to leave Dio and Scout out of this, right? So we were just both able to already anticipate what the other person might need and check in about that. And that was super helpful for me.
Yeah, there are so many reasons that you're one of my favorites, and this is one of them. Speaking of validation, I feel so validated hearing you say that, because that's exactly what I would also say is I needed people to take me seriously. I needed my feelings to be trusted and my experience to be affirmed, and to not be told that I was, especially as a young woman, like being dramatic or over emotional. and not get like those surface level platitudes. Like the number of people who told me, don't give up on Scout, when I had never even talked about the potential of giving up on her. I was just like, I'm having a really bad day. I need to tell somebody I love that I'm having a bad day. I guess, that's in the vein of like toxic positivity. Like, don't give up. It'll be great. I just needed it to be serious. I didn't need to wallow in it, right? Like there were so many things that I had to work on and process and develop better skills. But the best supports in my life were the people who never made me feel like Scout was just a dog and I should get over it. They were like, okay, this is hard. I'm here. How can I help? And that was huge. And that came from so many wonderful people who, again, like don't have this experience in the exact same way that I think the three of us on this podcast do. And that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy to remember.
It's such a lesson in general for how to treat other people who are going through something that you haven't gone through. We're not all going to go through the same things. We're all going to have like really different things happening in our lives and like how the cards play out for us. But I think something that I'm hearing is this idea of shame, Jess, I think it's so cool how you share that you struggled with, can I even keep my dog? Like the shame around that, like that is just released when you say that. For anybody who's listening that has gone through that, that's so cool. That's so valuable. This is like what we need to do to show up for people. And then get to actual solutions. And then Haley talking about like the toxic positivity of people just wanting to rush to I think it's something we can learn about how to be better friends and better listeners to people for whatever they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even in the experience of people telling me to not do what I was doing with him, right? I would take him over to, a family something or other, and I would be, managing him, keeping an eye on him, the stuff that you do, right? When you have a dog that you're not so sure about how they're going to do in a certain situation. And I would hear all the time, let him go. You're being too much. And I was like, listen, if I let him go, he's not going to make choices that are going to be successful. I want him to be successful. I want to set him up for success. So even just questioning my quote unquote parenting in those moments, right? Which really is what was happening and what I was doing, right? Was so invalidating and so disheartening versus, oh, is there anything you need me to do differently? Because I see that you're managing him, you're keeping an eye on him, right? So making me feel like I wasn't being too much was so helpful.
Yeah, I love that. If we can learn how to do that for each other on this topic, whether it's dogs or anything else you're going through, it's like it's going to make you such a better friend, such a better support person to people in your family and in your life. And then you're never going to be stuck with that. I think what it comes to is like, can you sit and hold people's discomfort? Or are you just going to rush to trying to fix it or trying to get them to drop it because it's inconvenient for you? Like the more we can learn to sit with this, the better. I think I've learned that in so many ways, but it was really surprising to me to learn this through my dog. Like it just would be the last place I would have ever thought that this would come up. And so in that sense, I think it's so great to hear from other people who've gone through this too. And I love that this is part of what you do and in who you work with. So I guess, can you tell us a little bit more about how people could work with you if they're going through this, looking for support in this way, how to find you and learn from you and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two main ways to work with me and get support, I have a community space that is called the Complex Canine Community, and there's discussion boards in there to just vent or celebrate or ask questions of other people who truly, truly get it from the human side of things. We don't actually talk about dog training in there at all. It's all about us. And there are resources in there. I have a course called Coping with Canines, which is in there, which gives some tools and different skills and techniques and things to think about to help people build those toolkits that I was talking about. So I've got resources for that in the community space. And we do live support group calls, which are really fun, twice a month, actually. And then in addition to that, I'm always available for one-on-one coaching as well with people. So you can find any of those options all on my website. And I'm actually really excited because I'm shifting my model a little bit for one-on-ones to offer a pay what you can option. So I'm really, really excited about that. That's coming this summer. I'm working on it in the back end right now.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to the Juniper podcast. We'll be back with more soon. That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.